We are good to go because we have with us today Sebastian Villarino. He's a postdoc research associate with Iowa State University. And again, he's going to be describing integrating anaerobic digestion with agriculture for improved carbon management. And I know I've already got a few questions coming in. This is definitely a topic folks are interested in, but if you have questions at any point, feel free to submit those in the chat and we will get those to Sebastian following his presentation. And with that, Sebastian, the virtual floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm so sorry for the delay, so thank you for your patience. So I want to start talking about cropland and carbon losses. In this map that I have on the right, in the upper panel, we can see the croplands and the grazing lands. And in the bottom panel, we can see an estimation of the carbon losses. And if we look at those maps, we can see that it's a very good match between the croplands and the carbon losses. So cropland expansion has resulted in substantial losses of carbon from soils. And this have two important consequences. One is that the carbon losses increase atmospheric CO2, and this promotes the climate change. And the other one is that when we lose carbon from soil, we reduce the soil health because carbon is the main component of the soil organic matter, and soil organic matter affects almost all the soil properties. So now I am going to talk about a theoretical framework, and this is about the carbon in croplands. When we talk about carbon in croplands, it's very common to focus on soil organic carbon. And why is that? It's because about 95% of the soil organic carbon is in the soil. And when the crop biomass reaches its maximum, about 5% of the carbon can be located in the biomass. And then we harvest the grain, and the stubers go to the soil and start to decomposing. And during the fallow periods, about 99% of the organic carbon is in the soil. That is why it's so important, and that is why when we talk about carbon balance in croplands, we talk about soil organic carbon balance. And the amount of carbon that we have in the soil is a balance, as I said, between the carbon inputs that in this case came from the crop biomass and the carbon outputs that came from the soil organic carbon mineralization, the decomposition through the microbes activity. So what happened in the farms when the anaerobic digestion is present? First, I'm going to introduce in the anaerobic digestion process. So anaerobic digestion is the breakdown of organic matter by microbes in the absence of oxygen. So the inputs to the digester can be stubble, manure, biomass, and the outputs or the products that we have are the methane, the CO2, and the digester. And the digester is the slurry after the anaerobic digestion. And then there are also other gases. So in a traditional system, we have this picture of the carbon balance. We have the CO2 that is taken from by the crops to produce biomass. Then the biomass go to the soil, and when the biomass reach the soil, a portion of this carbon is decomposed and released again to the atmosphere. And another portion remains in the soil as the new soil organic carbon formation. And on the other side, we have the soil organic carbon mineralization that is the process of decomposition of the soil organic carbon. And we have, of course, the harvest of the grain. When we combine this traditional system with anaerobic digestion, we change a bit this picture. So one thing that can happen is that we harvest the stubble, and the stubble goes to the anaerobic digester to produce the methane and the energy, and also to produce CO2. Then the digester can be applied to the on croplands to the soil. So now I am going to talk about this process of soil organic carbon formation. I will not talk about the soil organic carbon mineralization, and we have to assume that the mineralization doesn't change with this inclusion of the digester. So we still in the theoretical framework, and imagine that we have this 100% of crop stubble, and in the traditional system, we apply this stubble to the soil, and about 90% of the stubble is expired by the soil fauna and the microbes. And only a small portion remains in the soil, forming new soil organic carbon, about 10%. When we integrate the traditional system with the anaerobic digester, a portion of the crop stubble is respired inside during the anaerobic digestion. So let's say about 60% of the carbon is released during this process. And the other 40%, the digester, can be applied to the soil. If we want to maintain the same amount of new soil organic carbon formation, the digester must be more efficient to form new soil organic carbon, because we are applying a less amount, so this less amount of carbon must be compensated by a higher efficiency. In this case, that is a hypothetical case, we must to have 25% of the efficiency in the digester to maintain the same amount of new soil organic carbon. So, as I said, soil organic carbon formation efficiency of the digester must be higher than the stubble to keep stable the amount of new soil organic carbon. If the carbon balance remains unchanged, anaerobic digestion can capture energy as biogas that otherwise will be lost without affecting the soil organic carbon stocks. And the carbon balance can increase as soil organic carbon formation efficiency of the digester increase. This is the first scenario that I show you that the new soil organic carbon doesn't change. But if the formation efficiency of the digester increase, we can increase the soil organic carbon formation. And on the contrary, if the soil formation efficiency decrease, so we can decrease the soil organic carbon formation. So, in summary, the formation efficiency of the digester is very relevant to define the carbon balance in the croplands. And this is something that is unknown in the science. We are not sure about how is the formation efficiency of the digester, and that is why we are studying that. So let's see some results. This is a lab experiment that was carried out here in the Iowa State University. In this experiment, we use two soil types, soil textures, one loamy soil and other sandy soil. And we apply three rates of the anaerobic digester, a low, a medium, and a high rate. And we also have a control treatment. And in this plot, the red bars are the old soil organic carbon. That is the carbon that was present in the soil before aiding the anaerobic digester. The green bar is the new soil organic carbon that is derived from the digester. And the white bar is the carbon that was released from respiration. So something that we can see here is that the carbon balance in the soil increase with the anaerobic digestion rate. So when we apply more anaerobic digester, we increase the carbon balance. And the other thing is that the soil organic carbon formation efficiency of the digester is about 60–70%, which is pretty high. So we compare our results with other lab experiment that was carried out in Europe. In this experiment, the treatments, they test the digested maize, undigested maize, and sucrose. But let's look at the treatment of the undigested and the digested maize. The digested maize is this line with the triangles, and the undigested maize is the squares, this line. And this is, in the y-axis, is the respiration as a percentage of the carbon applied. And what we can see from this experiment is that the soil organic carbon formation efficiency of the digested was 60%, very similar to our results, because only 40% was respiring. And the undigested maize the formation efficiency was 10%. So formation efficiency increased 6 times after anaerobic digestion. So this result is in favor to hypothesis that the digester has a higher formation efficiency. But we don't know if we can extrapolate the results from the lab experiments to the farm scale. So this is another study. This is our own farm research in a commercial farm in the east of Iowa. In this picture, you can see the anaerobic digester, these tanks here, and these are the cattle barns and the croplands. In this system, the corn stover is harvested and go to the cattle barns to use as bedding for the cows. And here in the cattle barns, he produced beef. And then the corn stover plus the manure go to the digester to produce the methane and the energy. And there are also other carbon inputs to the anaerobic digester. That is the biomass from prairie and cover crops, and other organic products that came from the industry. Then the digester is separated into the liquid and the solid fraction, and both are applied to the soil in the croplands. So in this case, we analyze 14 fields receiving digester, more than 400 soil samples across 12 years, and we have information about the digester chemical composition, and about the management of the fields. And the results. If we look at the soil organic matter in this graph, here we have the soil organic matter as a function of the time, and each of these line is one field. We have these 14 fields. And when we fit a model to see the average increase or change in the soil organic matter, we observe that soil organic matter increased by 1% in 10 years. Then, when we look at the relationship between the soil organic carbon and the cumulative digestate carbon that was applied, we found this positive relationship. And again, when we fit a model to see the average relationship between these two variables, we observe that the slope of this relation is 0.18. And this means that the soil organic carbon increased by 0.18 per unit of digested applied. And this suggests that the soil organic carbon formation efficiency is around 18%. And it was also quite variable and can range between 14% and 21%. So why formation efficiency is much higher in the lab experiment? Well, there is a lot of differences between the lab experiment and the real world condition. For example, the time frame is shorter in the lab incubation experiment. In the lab, the soil is sealed and mixed, so we do not have the intact soil, and we must to destruct all the soil structure. The soil fauna and vegetation are not present in the lab experiment. The digested application is subject to losses in the field, and there are many more uncontrolled environmental variables in the fields, such as precipitation, temperature, wind, that can interact in different ways that we don't know. And that is why it's very important to complement the lab experiments with field experiment, and even more useful with on-farm research in commercial farms. So, but I said that the formation efficiency was quite variable. So what can be controlling the soil organic carbon formation efficiency? Well, the majority of the soil organic carbon is associated with soil minerals. So soil have a finite capacity to stabilize organic matter, largely defined by its amount of silt plus clay. So under this approach, the theory says that new soil organic carbon formation decreases as carbon saturation increases. And one measure of the carbon saturation degree is the gram of soil organic carbon per kilogram of silt plus clay. For example, if we have in this picture, the white box is the silt plus clay amount, and the black box is the soil organic carbon amount. In this representation, we are very close to the to carbon saturation. We are very close to reach the maximum limit of the soil to store soil organic carbon. So if we reduce the soil organic carbon amount, the soil is less saturated. But there is another way to reduce the carbon saturation, and is by increasing the silt plus clay amount. So that is why the relationship between soil organic carbon and silt plus clay is a good indicator of the carbon saturation status. And when we look at the relationship between the carbon saturation and the soil organic carbon changes, we found this negative relationship or correlation. What this means is that the soil organic carbon increases are higher when the soil are less saturated with carbon. So finishing my presentation, these are the take-home messages. The digester is more efficient in forming soil organic carbon than above-ground crop biomass. Coupling anaerobic digestion technology with agriculture production can enhance soil organic carbon. And the soil organic carbon stock increases faster when soil is less carbon saturated. And finally, anaerobic digestion on farm produces renewable energy that would otherwise be lost. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. If you want to keep on going to those next few slides as folks get their questions submitted in the chat, I can walk through these. If you tuned in today to earn a CCA CEU, I encourage you to submit your contact information, the name you used to watch the webinar. If it's different than the name you have registered with your CCA number, and that number to Aletta Whitaker at ALENAW@iastate.edu by 5 p.m. today, and she'll get that submitted so that you get your credit for tuning in today. If you want to go ahead to the next one. If you're been on a webinar before, you've seen this, but if you are joining us for the first time today, we encourage you to complete this voluntary demographic survey. This is for USDA-funded programs, and you can access that survey either via the QR code on your screen or visiting iowalearningfarms.org/survey. Only one survey response is needed for the year, so if you've already completed it, thank you. If you have not, it takes about 2 minutes, and we'd really appreciate you contributing to that survey. You want to go ahead to the next one for me? Next week, we have Elizabeth Schwab. She's a research scientist here at Iowa State University talking about visualizing drainage needs under a potential future climate. And actually thrilled to have Elizabeth back. She was one of our former interns here at the Iowa Learning Farms, now exploring her professional career as a research scientist. There's one more slide, and that's where you can find all of these archived webinars. Again, that's iowalearningfarms.org/webinars. If you visit our homepage, you can find the webinar button in the upper right corner. And you can also find us on YouTube there at that URL. You can simply search Iowa Learning Farms webinars to find them as playlists sorted by year and by topic. So with that, we have had some questions come in, specifically related to some of the anaerobic digestion topics that you've discovered or discussed today. First one here is, does there need to be a specific C to N ratio in place for AD systems to function properly? So more on the functionality of the AD system itself.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so this is more looking on the feedstock side of things. So what you're putting into it, does there need to be a specific C to N ratio of what's being fed to the anaerobic digestion system to have it function properly?
Okay, yes, I am not an expert about the feedstock and the anaerobic digestion process. I am more like a soil scientist. So I assume that yes, you have to maintain to have a specific CN ratio of the feedstock to make the digestion works properly. But I am sorry, I can't answer this question because I don't know.
And so in your case, the feedstocks were just corn stover and then also maybe mixed with manure?
Yes, mainly is corn stover plus manure, but sometimes the farmer receive like food waste or other types of byproduct from the industry. So yes, but the main carbon input came from the corn stover and the manual.
Got it. And there was another question in here, and this is all related to this project that we're a part of, in relation to costs and investments and setting this up. So I'm going to put in the chat here a link to a new tool that just came out in May, led by our team at Penn State. So you can use that spreadsheet to kind of figure out, if you're interested in getting an anaerobic digestion system, what's it going to cost to upfront set that up. So a question here was, what equipment is used to apply the digestate, like injected or surface applied? We'll start with that part of the question first.
In this case, the liquid digester was injected into the soil, and the solid digester was broadcasted on the surface.
And then as a follow-up, what were the NP and K values on average for that digestate? You can remember offhand.
No, I don't have the numbers on the top of my mind now, but what I can say is that the amount of phosphorus is pretty high. So when we look at the phosphorus in the soil, the phosphorus increase at a high rate. And the other thing is that the CN ratio of the solid digester is around 40, and the CN ratio of the liquid digester is much, much lower and can be around 5. So I think that the liquid digester can be used more as a fertilizer, because I don't expect too much immobilization with the application of the liquid digester. But on the contrary, the solid digester with this CN ratio is more like an organic amendment. Of course, that you increase the nutrients in the soil by applying the solid digester, but maybe you could have an immobilization phase after the addition of the solid digester. So maybe you have to be aware to don't apply the solid digester too much close to the to zone the crop, to avoid the immobilization of the nutrients.
And so similarly related to that, so this is asking, what is the level of carbon saturation? For example, if you have soil that is already at 5% carbon, should you apply to a soil with less carbon as you're thinking about where to put this digestate?
Just to be sure, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So to the point of maybe getting beyond what the soil can hold on to in terms of carbon, what is the level of carbon saturation? So if you already have a soil that's at 5% carbon, should you apply the digestate instead to a soil that's testing at a lower carbon percentage?
Yeah, well, carbon saturation depends on the percentage of carbon, but also of the silt plus clay content, as I said before. So, but in general, most of the soils in the croplands are far away from the carbon saturation. So I don't think it's, of course, that carbon saturation effect, but we are not too much close to reach this maximum limit. But what we can see from our results is that it's more difficult to increase the carbon when you are closer to the carbon saturation. But closer doesn't mean that we are close.
Okay. And so this next question comes kind of as a balance for that digestate. For example, if the stover is coming from, say, 10 acres, how many acres will the digestate treat? Is it 10 acres? Is it less acres, more acres? Like, what's the spread of that digestate versus the area of harvest?
Yes, this is a question also related more with the function of the digester and I'm sorry, but this is out of my scope. So I don't know the size of the field that you need to make the digester work.
Okay, so last question I have in here, unless folks have a few more they want to submit. So kind of that balance of removal of stover as a soil microbe food source and the timing, that unless you're planting cover crops, what's the impact of the soil health of the system through the removal of stover before the digest, because it takes time for the digestate to be produced. So how
Mhm.
are you balancing that gap between stover harvest and digestate application for feeding the microbes?
Yeah, it's true that when you remove the corn stubber, you are removing the food for the microbes. But in this case, for example, in this study, the farmer, when he harvests the stubber from a field, then the next year he applied the biofiber. And from what we can see from the soil test results is that the carbon is increasing. So I think that we are not seeing a negative impact of this management, of removing the corn stubber and applying the biofiber the next year. And probably it's because the roots keeps in the soil. So the microbes have the roots, and the roots are much more important to the soil than the above ground biomass in the terms of the how interacts with the microbes and how they can feed the microbe with carbon and nutrients.
And I know there was a few other kind of general anaerobic digestion questions that had come in terms of the function and the types of renewable natural gas produced and how it can be used. So I did share in the chat a couple of infographic publications that we have available on our website related to anaerobic digestion. So if you go to our website, for those of you watching this as a recording to find those, simply search in the box anaerobic and you'll come up with these two easy to read infographics that give kind of the high level introduction to these systems. And again, you can find the cost estimate tool from our friends at Penn State University Extension. They call it their on-farm digester assessment tool. So that's a free Excel file that you can find available online there. So with that, thank you so much, Sebastian. Thank you for joining us today. I'll give you the last word here.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and it was a pleasure for me to be here. So thank you. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but I hope you can enjoy the webinar.
Absolutely. And so if you'd like to follow up with specific questions to Sebastian, you can find him in our Iowa State directory, or his email is now in the chat for those of you that are still here with us today. So thank you so much. And again, we'll see you next week as we continue our weekly webinar series. Have a great day, everyone.